At 24, I already felt like my life had been placed on repeat. Every morning at 5:30, my alarm rang in a small apartment near Columbus. I pulled on the same work pants, drank coffee that tasted burned, and drove to a warehouse where I spent 10 hours moving boxes for strangers. The work was simple: scan the label, lift the box, move it to the correct pallet, repeat. After every shift, my back hurt, my hands smelled like cardboard, and my paycheck vanished before the next one arrived. I earned $2,400 a month after deductions. Rent took $850. My old Chevrolet needed fuel, insurance, and repairs. Then came groceries, utilities, and the minimum payment on a credit card I had used when my transmission failed. On paper, I had a full-time job. In reality, I was one unexpected expense away from borrowing more money. The worst part was knowing what the next 5 years would look like if I stayed. The older workers were not more secure, they simply had more expensive problems. One afternoon, a truck arrived at the warehouse. The driver backed into the loading bay, climbed down, carrying a metal mug. He looked tired, but also free. He was responsible for the entire trailer, not a single box. During my break, we talked. His name was Ray, and he had been driving for 11 years. "How much do drivers actually make?" I asked. "Depends on the company, the route, and how much you're willing to live in that cab," he said. "But a new driver can make more than you're making in there." He pointed toward the warehouse. That sentence stayed with me. More money, no degree required. It sounded almost too simple. That night, I searched for truck driving salaries. Some companies advertised first-year earnings of $55,000, $65,000, even $80,000. Those numbers looked enormous. I imagined clearing my debt, saving money, and eventually buying my own truck. The ads made trucking look like a straight road from low wages to financial freedom. Get a CDL, join a carrier, earn money while seeing the country. They did not show what the road demanded in return. I only saw an exit. 2 weeks later, I enrolled in driving school. Tuition was nearly $6,000. I did not have it. The school offered financing, and a carrier promised reimbursement if I agreed to work for them after earning my commercial driver's license. It sounded like they were paying for my future. In reality, I was signing a contract before I understood the job. If I quit too early, part of the training cost could become my responsibility. If the company gave me difficult routes, low-paying miles, or weeks away from home, I would have little power to complain. The recruiter called it an opportunity. The paperwork felt more like a financial leash. Training lasted several weeks. I learned to inspect brakes, connect a trailer, reverse into narrow spaces, and control a vehicle weighing tens of thousands of pounds. Behind the wheel, the truck felt like a moving building. Every mistake was slower, heavier, and more dangerous. I failed my first backing test. Then I passed on the second attempt. When I finally earned my CDL, I felt like I had crossed into a different life. A large carrier hired me quickly. The recruiter talked about steady freight, modern equipment, health insurance, bonuses, and unlimited earning potential. But drivers were paid mainly by the mile, and a truck that was not moving was not earning. Waiting at warehouses, sitting in traffic, inspecting equipment, and searching for parking could consume hours without producing the paycheck I imagined. I would learn that later. For now, I packed clothes, food, a blanket, and enough optimism to fill the passenger seat. On Monday morning, I climbed into the cab for my first long-haul assignment. My hands tightened around the wheel. The engine vibrated beneath me. The warehouse disappeared in my mirrors. At last, I felt like I was moving forward. I just did not realize how expensive that movement could become. My first long-haul assignment took me from Ohio to Colorado carrying food. The dispatcher called the route simple: pick up, drive west, deliver before 6 on Wednesday morning. On the screen, it looked predictable. On the road, nothing was predictable. The first day went well. I kept both hands on the wheel, checked my mirrors often, and tried not to think about the weight behind me. Every lane change felt like a decision that could ruin lives. By sunset, my shoulders were stiff. I had imagined trucking as long stretches of open highway and independence. Instead, I spent hours among impatient cars, roadwork, and drivers who cut in front of me. The company tracked everything: my speed, fuel use, braking, location, remaining driving time. Federal rules limited how long I could drive. In practice, the clock became another pressure. Every traffic jam, slow loading dock, and wrong turn consumed minutes I could not recover. If I reached my legal limit, I could not simply continue. But parking did not care about my clock. That first night, I stopped at a truck plaza around 8. Every legal space was taken. Drivers had parked along curbs, beside ramps, and in gaps that barely looked large enough for a car. I circled twice. Nothing. I drove to another stop 20 miles away, full again. My clock kept falling. Finally, I found an unofficial space behind a fuel station. The ground was uneven, the lighting poor, and another truck idled beside me all night. I slept in pieces, waking whenever headlights crossed the curtains. At 5, I washed my face, bought an overpriced sandwich, and returned to the road. That was when I understood the first hidden cost of trucking. The company paid me for miles, not for comfort, not for sleep, not for the time spent finding a safe place to stop. By the second day, loneliness settled into the cab. At the warehouse, I had complained about supervisors and noise, but at least people were around me. On the highway, I could drive for hours without speaking to anyone except my dispatcher. My friends were home meeting for dinner. I was eating crackers at a rest area, while rain slid down the windshield. Then the weather turned. Near Kansas, the rain became sleet. By eastern Colorado, snow was blowing across the road until the lane markings vanished. The trailer moved differently in the wind. Each gust pushed against it like a hand on a door. I slowed down. The dispatcher called almost immediately. "You're falling behind," she said. "I can barely see the road. The customer expects delivery at 6. That was the contradiction of the job. The company said safety came first, but every system rewarded speed. Delays damaged performance scores. Late deliveries created angry calls. Fewer completed miles meant less pay. I continued carefully, gripping the wheel until my fingers hurt. A pickup passed too quickly, lost traction, and spun toward the median. I watched it disappear into the snow behind me. For several seconds, I forgot to breathe. I wanted to stop, but there was nowhere safe to pull over, so I kept moving. By midnight, my eyes burned. Coffee no longer helped. The heater dried the air, and the vibration made my body feel numb. I reached the delivery center after 7, over an hour late. The customer was angry. The dispatcher sounded disappointed. No one asked what the storm had been like. The unloading crew took nearly 3 hours to empty the trailer. I sat in the cab, unable to begin my next route, and unable to earn more miles. That week, I spent more than 70 hours away from home, including driving, waiting, fueling, and parking. My paycheck reflected only part of that time. It was still larger than my warehouse paycheck, but the difference no longer felt impressive. I was earning more money by giving the job almost every waking hour I had. The road had raised my income, but it had also taken control of my time and sleep, and this was only my first trip. 3 months into the job, I stopped feeling like a visitor in the cab. I knew which truck stops filled early, and which warehouses could hold a driver for hours. I had learned to sleep beside running engines and eat meals behind the wheel. I had also started earning more. Not as much as promised, but enough to keep me hopeful. Then the engine failed. I was hauling packaged goods through western Nebraska when a warning light appeared on the dashboard. Seconds later, the truck lost power. I pressed the accelerator, but the speed kept falling. Cars rushed past while I guided the truck onto the shoulder. The engine coughed once and died. I called roadside assistance, then my dispatcher. "How soon can you move?" she asked. "I can't move at all." The delivery was due the next morning. The nearest repair facility was 80 miles away. A tow truck arrived 4 hours later. I sat in the cab watching my delivery window disappear. The repair shop found a failed fuel system component. The company owned the truck, so I did not receive the repair bill directly. But that did not mean the breakdown cost me nothing. I was paid by the mile. A truck sitting in a repair yard produced 0 miles. The repair took 2 days. I spent that time in a low motel, waiting for updates. The company covered part of the room, but breakdown pay was far below what I could have earned driving. The customer threatened to reject the delayed shipment. Dispatch found another driver to finish the delivery, so I lost the remaining paid miles. When my paycheck arrived, it was hundreds of dollars smaller than expected. The truck had broken. My income had taken the damage. I told myself it was bad luck. 2 weeks later, a tire blew out in Missouri. The explosion sounded like a gunshot beneath the trailer. Rubber struck the truck, and the steering wheel pulled hard in my hands. I slowed carefully and reached the shoulder. This time, I was carrying a time-sensitive load. Every hour of delay created another argument between the customer, carrier, and dispatch. The tire service truck took almost 3 hours to arrive. The company claimed I should have noticed the damage. I objected. I had checked the tire that morning and seen no obvious defect. But disagreement meant little when the company controlled the paperwork. A safety deduction appeared on my next statement. There was also a charge linked to the missed appointment and a reduction in my performance bonus. Together, they erased most of the extra money I had expected that month. That was when I understood how risk was divided in trucking. The carrier owned the equipment, set the rate, chose the customer, and controlled the schedule. But when something went wrong, part of the cost still reached the driver through lost miles, reduced bonuses, unpaid waiting, or deductions. The customer might pay several $1,000s to move a load across the country. I saw only a fraction of it. At first I assumed the company kept the difference. Then I started asking questions. The freight payment had to cover diesel, insurance, truck payments, trailer costs, maintenance, permits, tolls, office staff, dispatchers, compliance systems, and taxes. The company carried enormous expenses, but so did I. I paid for food, laundry, phone service, supplies, and transport when the truck was unavailable. I also gave away unpaid hours waiting at docks or repair shops. Gross pay looked respectable. Hourly reality looked different. One month, I counted every hour I spent driving, inspecting, waiting, fueling, completing paperwork, finding parking, or dealing with breakdowns. Then I divided my pay by those hours. The result was close to my warehouse pay. The difference was that the warehouse had let me go home every night. I entered trucking believing hard work would pay more. Instead, I discovered that the road often paid only when everything went right, and everything never stayed right for long. By the 6th month, I had stopped measuring success by the size of a paycheck. I started measuring it by what remained after the road took its share. One evening, I delivered appliances from Illinois to Georgia. The customer had paid the carrier more than $4,000 for the shipment. My pay for the trip was less than $900. At first, the difference made me angry. Then I began tracing where the money went. The truck burned hundreds of gallons of diesel. Fuel consumed a large part of the rate. The carrier also paid for commercial insurance, permits, tolls, maintenance, trailers, dispatchers, office staff, software, taxes, and the truck itself. But neither did I keep every dollar on my settlement. Truck stop food cost far more than meals at home. Laundry, parking, phone data, gloves, flashlights, medicine, and small equipment came from my pocket. Then there were taxes. The number at the top of the statement looked like income. The number reaching my bank account told the truth. I began writing everything down. One week, I earned $1,650 before deductions. It felt like progress. After taxes, insurance contributions, food, and road expenses, I kept less than $1,050. Then I divided that amount by the total time I had been away from home. The hourly result was painful. I had increased my gross income, but I had not increased my freedom by the same amount. That was the second contradiction of trucking. A driver could make more money and still feel poorer because the job consumed the time needed to enjoy it. I met drivers with impressive salaries and houses they barely visited. Others financed larger homes because the income looked permanent. Then freight slowed. Their miles dropped, but their payments did not. One driver named Curtis had been earning well for years. He bought a new pickup, moved into a larger house, and added several credit cards. When his route disappeared, his income fell by nearly a third. Within months, he was borrowing money to protect the lifestyle his higher salary had created. The lesson was obvious. Income was not wealth. Revenue was not profit. And a busy driver was not always a successful driver. I started saving aggressively. I paid off my credit card and built a small emergency fund. For the first time, I had breathing room. But I also became curious about the other side of the business. Independent drivers discussed load boards, contracts, fuel discounts, taxes, and weeks when one truck earned more than I made in a month. Owning the truck seemed to change everything. Instead of receiving a small slice of the freight payment, I could collect the full rate. That idea stayed in my head. I knew the full rate was not the same as profit. Fuel, insurance, repairs, tolls, and taxes would come first. Still, the possibility was difficult to ignore. If a carrier could earn thousands from one trip, why could I not do the same with my own truck? I began asking owner-operators what they earned. Their answers were never simple. One said he grossed $220,000 the previous year. Another laughed when I asked about profit. Gross numbers are for bragging, he said. Net numbers are for surviving. He showed me a repair invoice for more than $14,000. One breakdown had erased months of profit. That should have scared me away. Instead, it made the challenge feel real. I was no longer chasing an advertisement. I was studying a business. Every night, I compared used truck prices, loan payments, insurance quotes, fuel costs, and freight rates. The numbers worked only if the truck stayed moving, loads paid enough, and major repairs stayed away. Those were three dangerous conditions. The risk was real, but the opportunity felt truly mine. But after a year on the road, I had saved enough for a down payment. For the first time, I was not thinking like an employee. I was thinking like an owner. And ownership was about to teach me the difference between earning money and carrying risk. I bought the truck on a cold morning in February. It was used, blue, and already worn by 600,000 miles. The price was $52,000. I put down $10,000 and financed the remaining $42,000. My monthly payment was about $1,150 before insurance, registration, permits, or fuel. The moment I signed the papers, the truck stopped being a dream. It became a bill. I left the carrier, registered my business, opened a bank account, and bought commercial insurance. The insurance quote shocked me, roughly $1,300 a month for a new owner-operator running under his own authority. Then came plates, taxes, logging fees, compliance services, and the deposit required to open a fuel account. Before I hauled my first independent load, nearly $15,000 had already left my account through the down payment, insurance deposit, plates, permits, and setup costs. Still, the first week felt exciting. I found a load from Ohio to Texas paying $3,600. As a company driver, I might have earned a fraction of that. Now the full rate was mine. At least, that was how it looked. Fuel cost almost $1,300. Tolls, food, and dispatch fees took more. I set aside money for taxes and maintenance. By the time I reached Texas, the load had not made me rich, but it had made a profit. I felt unstoppable. That feeling lasted 9 days. The freight market slowed, and the return loads were terrible. One broker offered a rate barely high enough to cover fuel. I rejected it. Then I waited. Every hour the truck sat still. The payment remained. Insurance remained. The truck was not earning, but the business was still spending. After 2 days, I accepted a week load just to move. That was my first lesson as an owner. Sometimes the worst load is not the low-paying one. It is the empty truck waiting for a perfect rate. I started using load boards late at night, calling brokers, comparing routes, and calculating fuel costs before accepting anything. A load paying $4,000 could be worse than one paying $3,000 if it sent me into an area with no return freight. The number on the contract was only the beginning. The lane determined the real value. Then, 3 months later, the truck began losing coolant. I hoped it was a small leak. It was not. The repair shop found damage in the cooling system and warned that ignoring it could destroy the engine. The estimate was $9,800. I had a maintenance fund, but not enough. For the first time, I understood why experienced drivers kept saying that an owner-operator needed cash, not just profit on paper. I had profitable loads scheduled. I also had a truck that could not move. The shop wanted payment before releasing it. The lender still wanted the monthly installment. The insurance company still wanted its premium. I used my emergency fund, borrowed part of the balance on a business card, and canceled 2 loads. The repair erased nearly everything I had earned since becoming independent. For weeks, I wondered whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But selling the truck would not erase the debt. So I went back to work. I became more disciplined. I also called small manufacturers directly. Most ignored me. One did not. A packaging company outside Columbus needed regular regional deliveries. The rate was not spectacular, but the schedule was steady and payment arrived on time. That one customer changed the business. Soon, a second customer followed. I still took loads from brokers, but I no longer depended on strangers for every week of income. Slowly, the truck became less like a gamble and more like a system. I paid down the credit card. Then I rebuilt the repair fund. Months passed without a major breakdown. The loan balance finally started falling fast enough for me to notice. I was not financially free. I still worked long days, worried about freight, and listened for engine sounds that did not belong. But for the first time, the risk and reward were connected to my decisions. The road had not given me freedom. It had given me responsibility, and responsibility, managed well enough, was beginning to look like a path forward.